This video begins digestive system, the anatomy of the digestive system. But let's begin by reviewing what we know about the body cavity that's found within the torso of the human body. The diaphragm cuts the body cavity into two main cavities. Above the diaphragm, the big breathing muscle, is the thoracic cavity. That's all this up here. And then below the diaphragm is the abdominopelvic cavity, which is what we're going to focus on today. In a previous video, when we did the respiratory system and cardiology, we functioned on the thoracic cavity. Now we want to focus on the abdominopelvic cavity. So the first thing we're going to do is this big organ right here is called the liver. And it's big. It has over 200 known functions. It detoxifies materials. It's rich in all kinds of enzymes that break down toxic materials. Anything coming from the digestive system into the blood has to go through the liver first so it can clean it up. It's really a protective organ. And then in addition to that, the liver produces bile, and that bile is stored in the posterior part of the liver. This green part down here is called the gallbladder. The gallbladder. And what the gallbladder does is it stores bile and enriches bile. Okay, so that's the liver and the gallbladder. When food comes down the esophagus from the oral cavity, it's swallowed, it goes down through the esophagus, and then it goes into the stomach. This is the stomach coming out right here. The stomach has a sphincter up here, which is a sphincter is a circular muscle that can close off the organ that it surrounds, and that sphincter muscle is called the cardiac sphincter or the gastroesophageal sphincter. See? Bring it up so you can see. That's the cardiac sphincter right there, the cardiac sphincter. Okay. And then at the lower end of the stomach, it has another sphincter, this one right here, that's called the pyloric sphincter. Okay, and it'll keep the food in the stomach until it's ready to be passed on to the next part of digestion, which takes place in the duodenum. So down in the oral cavity, swallowed through the esophagus, down into the stomach through the cardiac sphincter, then it's mixed up in the stomach, and then it goes into the duodenum from the pyloric sphincter. Okay, so the duodenum is right back here. We got to kind of get some of this out of the way. I'll have to put it back in too. So I want you to get a good look at the duodenum. This is the large intestine right here. Here's the duodenum right here. Duodenum, and that's right where the pyloric sphincter will hook up. Here's the duodenum. It's about 8 inches long, and it's C-shaped. Get that off of there. Okay. In the oral cavity, down the esophagus, through the cardiac sphincter, into the stomach, through the pyloric sphincter, into the duodenum. Now you see right here is the pancreas. We've seen the pancreas when we studied the endocrine system. Pancreas is part of the digestive system because it produces enzymes that break the food down when it's inside of the duodenum. Now after the food comes in through the duodenum, it goes into 2 more sections of the small intestine. All this right here is small intestine, and you can't really tell one of the sections from the other, except that the one that comes straight from the duodenum is called the jejunum, and then the last part is called the ileum. And what goes on in the jejunum and the ileum is you're absorbing the food that has been digested by the mouth, the stomach, and the duodenum. You're absorbing the nutrients into the bloodstream. Okay, and of course I told you all that goes to the liver first through the hepatic portal system before it goes anyplace else. So let's take the jejunum and the ileum out. I know this over here is the ileum because there's the connection. There's the connection to the large intestine. Okay, that's the ileocecal valve right there. See, the colon, or the large intestine, has an ascending portion, a transverse portion, and a descending portion. Okay, and the first part of it's called the cecum, and the ileocecal opening is right there, and the appendix is just inferior to it. That's where the appendix is. Lower right quadrant. Okay, remember those quadrant then. Okay, lower right quadrant. Cecum, ileocecal opening, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon. And what the colon does is it reabsorbs water, and it also takes back in a lot of the electrolytes would be lost if it weren't for the large intestine. Okay, and then we'll take this out of here. Let me take it out and see if I can, having trouble getting things in front of the camera. There's the appendix attached to the cecum of the ascending colon. Then there's the transverse colon, and then over here is the descending colon. Okay, this last part of the large intestine is called the sigmoidal colon. I don't know if I can show it. That it forms an S right there, the last part. Okay, and then it finally goes down here into the rectum. The rectum is this lower part where it's going to be retained until you defecate it, until you release it. Okay, so let's just review the organs of the digestive tract. Here's the liver. The liver is for detoxification of materials. It has enzymes that break down toxic materials. Everything, when it's absorbed from the digestive tract, has to go through the liver first. Okay, and one of the functions of the liver is it produces the bile, which is stored and concentrated or enriched in the gallbladder down here. In the gallbladder, which is on the posterior side of the liver. Okay, then when food comes down in the oral cavity, down the esophagus, and into this organ, which is the stomach, remember it has the cardiac or gastroesophageal sphincter at the top, at the superior end, and the pyloric sphincter at the inferior end. Okay, pyloric sphincter, gastroesophageal sphincter. And then from there, it goes through the pyloric sphincter. When that opens up, it goes into the duodenum, the first portion of the small intestine. It's about 8 inches long, C-shaped, and here's the pancreas right by it that secretes digestive enzymes into it. From the duodenum, it goes into the jejunum, okay, and then from the jejunum, this is 2 more portions of the small intestine. It goes into the ileum, and that's where the nutrients and the good stuff is absorbed into the blood, but then it has to, in case there's anything bad in it, it first goes through the liver, through that hepatic portal system, and then it comes out the cecum, it comes out the ileocecal, to get this turned around right, it's easy to get mixed up. Okay, here's the ileocecal opening. That's where the ileum empties the chyme into the cecum, which is the first part of the colon, and down here attached to it, as you can see, that's the appendix. Okay, then we have the transverse colon, the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon. Okay, here's the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and then the descending colon down that side. Here's the appendix. Here's the appendix. Here's the ascending colon. Here's the transverse colon. Here's the descending colon. And then there's a section of it that is S-shaped. It's called the sigmoidal colon, the S-shaped part, and then the last part into the rectum where it's held until it's defecated. So that's a brief introduction to the anatomy of the digestive system.